Hey, guys and girls, this week we're going to kind of dive into the weeds of our finances. So, we're going to talk gross profit, cost of goods sold, expenses. Huge disclaimer, Jeff and I are not accountants.
No, we do not pretend to be in any situation.
We are not CPAs as well. Hire a good firm for that. But I think this week, Jeff, we're going to get into the weeds just a little bit. In the next couple of weeks, we're going to evolve this discussion. Any questions y'all have, please reach out to us.
Welcome to the Independent Dealer Podcast, the podcast for auto dealers to learn and grow together. Here are your hosts, Luke Godwin and Jeff Watson.
All right, guys and girls, this week we're going to try to really start talking about what does income look like, what does cost of goods sold look like, and what do our expenses look like. I think that we all get lost in selling the car and making money and really forget about the backside of it. Don't you think, Jeff?
Yeah, I think that's the number one thing that came to mind for me was I just think that we gotta, we're gonna take you guys down a path this week, next week, and kind of do some financial calisthenics. Let's do some exercises. Let's see what it looks like. What are our cars costing us? What are we selling them for? What is our gross profit? What is our, like Luke said, our variable expenses? What are our fixed expenses? What does it really cost us to sell a car?
And then mainly, are we making money, right?
Change? Yeah. But that changes. I think we get caught in our minds where it's like, oh, it cost me $1,800 to sell a car. And we get that number stuck in our head. Like, I can't let a car go unless I'm making at least $1,800 to break even. But that changes as volume goes up.
Yep.
So a lot of people have got to understand that. So help us out, Luke. Get us started here. What do we need to first? And I know we're going to simplify this because we want everyone to kind of be able to compare apples to apples. And that'd be my disclaimer to this whole conversation is there's a million different ways to do this. We all have different business models. Some of us have in-house recon. Some of us get everything frontline ready. Some of us buy nice cars that just don't need any work. So help us understand as we go down this exercise, what are we talking about when we talk about income and cost of car? Because those are your two top line items on your P&L, right?
So let's talk about income to start with. A lot of people will say income, and when you talk about income, let's talk about gross money coming into the dealership, right? That's what we need to be talking about. When we're talking about income, the top part of our P&L, we aren't talking about what's taken out of that. We're talking about what's coming in. So in the car business, you've got several, depending if you're retail or buy here, pay here. So let's just look at retail real quick. So what we have is that top line number of income should be what we sell the car for, right? So let's just work on round numbers. I sold 20 cars last month and I sold them all for $10,000. That income there is $200,000, right, Jeff?
Okay.
All right. What else can we do that generates that income if I'm just a retail dealer? Well, I've got wholesale cars because in theory, I probably took in some trade-ins, right?
Okay.
So I've got wholesale cars that I've sold out. So that needs to be added to your income as well.
Okay.
And then hopefully I'm selling some back-end products, some F&I products, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I need to add that in as well. Okay. So I've got what the top line number of the car sales, the gross car sales. I've got the gross wholesales, and I've got the gross F&I product sale, right?
Okay. All sources of income, everything that's coming into your dealership by cash, check, money order, credit card, carrier pigeon, everything coming in that's a dollar amount, right?
Yeah. And if you have a service department, it would be all of your service income.
Oh, man. Yeah. That's a whole nother ballpark for sure.
So that's my gross income, right?
Wholesale cars. Did you mention that, right?
Wholesale cars.
Okay. You did.
My trade-ins, all that.
Yeah. So if I send my scraps to the auction,
it's still income.
I got to account for that, right?
That's right.
Now, help me out, and maybe can I go down this road real quick? Because this has always been a point of contention for me, and this might be a rabbit hole we don't want to get into. But when I'm calculating, which we're going to do probably next week, when I'm calculating my cost to sell a car, should I be taking out those wholesale or scrap car sales, not accounting for them? Because I sell stuff on what we call our cash cars, which are basically $500, $1,000 junkers that are just, or maybe we send them to the scrapyard.
Right.
I mean, those aren't really. I mean, I'm break even or I lose $1,000 on each one. So if I'm bringing those numbers, it's not going to skew it.
I base everything on retail car sales.
Okay.
So I add the wholesale money in there, and honestly, I don't make much on wholesales, and I probably end up at the end of the year maybe net loss a little bit, depending if I've written the inventory down or whatever. But typically, just in my business model, there's a lot of people out there that do make plenty of money wholesaling, and you might want to look at those two things separately. You may say, okay, what are my expenses on the wholesale side? What are my expenses on the retail side? You may want to, if you really have a wholesale operation, you may want to break that out.
Okay. Because we know those can skew your numbers quite a bit because it is an expense you need to track because that situation where your buyer or yourself are bringing in a bunch of bad cars and you're wholesaling them out the back and taking some massive losses, that's going to affect you. So do track that within its own bucket, but maybe for the sake of argument, we talk about just retail sales.
I think so, because I think the wholesale, if you don't have a real wholesale operation and you're not making a lot of bad choices in your buying decisions, and hopefully you're not. And I think today with PSI and things like that, you're probably making a lot less bad decisions. I mean, we all make bad decisions, but that's neither here nor there. But the wholesale part of it, in theory, if you don't have a wholesale operation, should really even out at the end of the year, right? There shouldn't be really any huge gains and there shouldn't be any huge losses, because you may get a huge gain on one car and you may get a huge loss on another or trade in, and it evens out over time. So we won't necessarily look at that. But the other thing is, so we talk, that's a retail operation. So if we talk about a buy here, pay here operation, you've got a couple more streams of income that you should talk about as well. Interest income. We all know what that is. If we are in the buy here, pay here business, we are charging interest on that loan. And honestly, that would be a huge number, depending on how many accounts you've got. But it could be, for some people, it could be north of $1 million a month, depending on how many accounts they have. That's a lot of accounts, don't get me wrong. But we also have late fee income, and we also have miscellaneous fee income, as well as charge off recovery income. So those are the couple things that you have in the buy here, pay here side that you wouldn't necessarily have in the retail side. So if you're in the buy here, pay here business, think about that. Those are your other income situations. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. For the sake of this example, what do you say we leave the buy here, pay here out of it? And that could be a follow-up, because it's such a beast. If we start talking about discounts on your notes and then your, deferred revenue income, it just gets into a whole mess there for sure. So
I had accounting all under wraps a few years back until we decided to open RFC, and it threw a monkey wrench into everything. I had to relearn it. It was just real.
So if we're taking all of our incomes in, everything that we brought in the front door, sales, F&I products, any kind of maybe processing fees that we charge on credit cards or whatever, and then what do we do with it? We got a total income for the month. We're going to have to subtract out some expenses, right?
That's right.
Cost of car goods.
You've got cost of goods sold, which is one, and you got expenses. So the cost of goods sold, what we're going to talk about right in a second, would be your make ready expense, what's your inventory cost, your recon expenses. Now, some people add the recon expenses into the inventory, which I do. Are you giving a service? I mean, are you giving a warranty on the car? That would be part of your cost of goods sold. And some people, depending on how you break it out, some people would have an allowance for trade-in as well as a cost of goods sold. That's, that might be the way somebody looks at it, may not be. There are different ways to skin this cat, but your big cost of goods sold is the cost of your inventory plus recon plus make-ready expense, okay?
And any F&I product costs, right?
Any F&I product costs.
And where do we bring in sales tax, tags, licenses, registrations?
Well, that shouldn't be a cost.
You would say
that shouldn't be a cost of goods sold, because your customer's paying for it. What I tend to do on that is I make on the balance sheet, I have a liability
Mm-hmm.
that goes to, so I can pay it out of there. It's not really a cost of goods sold.
Okay.
Now you may argue that differently.
Right.
You understand the cost of goods sold, right? Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, I think so. And for the sake of this conversation, guys, we're going to talk, when we say cost of goods sold, we're going to wrap in everything that takes you from purchase of car to frontline, because all of us have different operations. Some of us have service shops. Some of us purposely seek after project cars because we know we have a ton of service mechanics and a body shop that can get some value there. Others of us buy frontline ready only units. So we have zero in recon, so to speak. So for the sake of this discussion, Luke, let's just say cost of goods to get it to the front line.
That's right. Let's just say that we buy the car. That's the cost of the car. Let's say we got transportation added into that. Let's say we have the recon, we have body work, we have all this. So that's where we are. So your cost of goods sold, your overall income minus your cost of goods sold will give you the gross profit for the month, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's go back to, we sold 20 cars at $10,000 a piece.
Mm-hmm.
We had $200,000 in total income.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we paid, and after getting everything ready, after the cost of, let's say we had, let's say those cars cost us $150,000, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And we're spending, let's use some decent numbers here. We're spending $700 a car, get ready, right?
Okay.
So that was $14,000 plus $150. We're at $64,000, $164,000 in total cost of goods, right?
Okay. Works for me.
Okay.
So I made these cars $164,000. I sold them for $200,000. That's
so gross profit of $36,000.
Okay.
So that means I made $36,000, right?
No, it doesn't mean you made $36,000. That means you got a top line gross profit of $36,000.
Oh man, why not? I thought I made $36,000. So that gives us $1,800 gross per car, right?
Okay.
So we better be running a lean operation, right?
Yeah. That scares me.
That scares you, huh? What does it cost you to sell a car?
That's a good question, Luke. What does it cost me to sell a car?
So that's where our expenses come in. What does it actually cost us to sell a car?
Okay.
All right. So we have fixed expenses and variable expenses, right, Jeff?
Okay. And a fixed expense for the conversation that we're going to go into today is anything. We're going to take this on a very short timeline. So for the month, any expenses that you would have regardless of how many cars you sell. If you sold one car, you're still going to have to cut a check for a fixed expense. If you sold 100 cars, that check wouldn't move much. And so these are what, Luke? Give us examples of fixed expenses.
Number one is rent, right?
Yep.
Number one is rent. So we've got to cut a check for rent. Probably I would think the average person out there is paying rent anywhere from, probably on the low side of $2,000 a month up to $20,000 a month, depending on the size of your operation. So we've got rent, and we've got utilities. We got to keep the lights on, right?
Yeah. I mean, my lights are on, my AC's going, regardless of whether I sold 1 or 100 last month. And
we also have telephones. We got to answer the phone calls when they come in, right?
Yep. Yeah, I would argue that if I got phones for 5 guys, that's going to be an expense regardless of how many they sell.
That's right. So insurance as well. You've got to have, dealer insurance. So that's going to be an expense we've got every month, no matter if we sell or not.
Mm-hmm. And some of these, again, you guys, some of these will change over the long term. If you're talking about a 12-month period, those are they're going to fluctuate. But for the sake of this conversation, within that 30-day window, they're going to be the same.
So if we're at $36,000 of gross income and we just take out our fixed expenses, let's just say that person's paying $2,500 a month for rent. We're down to $33,500, right? So then we're probably paying, let's say, $500 in utilities. We're down to $33,000, and we're paying $400 for phones. We're down at $32,600. I made $32,600, right, Jeff?
Well, I would say, I mean, there's probably a couple other fixed expenses. We talked also about, legal accounting, right?
That's right. So, and I forgot to put the insurance in there. And the insurance probably costing you $1,000 a month. And legal and accounting, what are you figuring on that?
I don't know. I mean, not much. Yeah, $500 if you have an outside accounting service. Whether they're adding up $2 or adding up 200,000, you're still gonna pay them, and it'll fluctuate a little teeny bit, but for the sake of argument, okay. Where does that leave us?
We're down to 31,100.
Okay.
So now we have to start adding up our variable expenses. And there's so many different variable expenses. I think we're going to try to take those as almost a whole podcast on really talking about expenses. But variable expenses, range the board, and these fluctuate. Let's talk about what a variable expense is, Jeff.
Okay.
If I'm selling, 10 cars a month, my variable expenses for the whole dealership might be $15,000 because I have small staff. I'm not advertising a ton. We're not using a lot of office supplies. Maybe I'm not going to a lot of training sessions like I do. I may not even take credit cards. I may not have any processing fees. My floor plan interest is really low because I don't have much on floor plan. My bank fees are minimal because I don't have a lot of transactions going through there. And my policy expense, is not going to be that high because I'm not selling a lot of cars, right?
Okay.
But if I'm selling a lot of cars, if I'm selling 50 cars a month, if I go from selling 10 to 50, that thing's going to jump up kind of quickly, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is it going to increase by a magnitude of 5, or how is it going to increase?
I would imagine in my brain, a variable expense is going to increase variable with the amount of units you're selling, right?
Right. It's not going to be directly proportional, but you can. At what point does it quit rising? I guess would be the question, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we try to all want to figure out. And maybe there's not an exact way to do it without experience. I don't know that answer.
Mm-hmm. So you're talking about those expenses that you're going to gain an advantage on basically the economies of scale. Like, where do you get to the point where I sell 20 cars and it doesn't cost me anymore to sell an additional 10 and get to 30 necessarily?
And it probably won't. But that jump from 30 to 50, I think you would see a significant rise in your cost. But there's people talking this week on the or last week on the Facebook page about how many people does it take to sell a certain amount of cars, and I think the biggest expense most of us have in a dealership is pretty simple. It's advertising and staff, right?
Yeah, personnel for sure.
That's it. So the key is, how can I increase sales without advertising anymore, right?
Okay. And
how can I increase sales without having any more people, or actually people who cost me money? If you're on commissions, another salesperson shouldn't really cost you any more money beside payroll taxes and maybe insurance.
Okay.
But that's it. So how do we figure out where that number is? So if I'm a small dealer and it's just me, and I'm selling cars for $1,800 a month, I don't have a huge expense any which way, then I might be fine to sell 20 cars a month, make, $20,000 a month. That's pretty good living, right, Jeff?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that works for me.
Works for me. So, but if I decide that, hey, I'm working way too much and I got to hire a salesperson, then I cut down that 20 grand, but it might increase my sales as well. So, you've got, it's very important to look at these variable expenses and know what your fixed expenses are, and to look at your variable expenses and see, does it make sense to sell more cars? Because there are cases where it doesn't make sense to sell more cars. And that sounds crazy, right?
It does, yeah.
Because selling more cars could cost me more money.
Okay.
I don't know if anybody out there will even come close to believing that, but I can tell you it happens. Because if you sell more cars and you have to increase your bottom line, not your bottom line, but you have to increase your expenses to sell 5 more cars, well, it may not balance itself out. So you may have to keep those expenses level and figure out how to sell 15 more cars to actually see the revenue generation between those two, or the net income. And that's another word we hadn't talked about.
Yeah, we haven't quite gotten there yet. So in this example, I'm going to back it up a little bit. So we have fixed expenses of about $250 per car in this 20 car example. Now, talk to me, what do you think the variable expenses would be, and like per car sale? Because that's something, so if we talk about those kind of line items, maybe we can do some quick math for everybody on just the basics. Obviously, like you said, we've got personnel. Now, tell me this, Luke, in your opinion, would you put all payroll into a variable expense or just sales commissions? Because we didn't really discuss that from a fixed expense standpoint. You might have some fixed expenses on owners, management, guys that get their salary regardless of how many are sold, title clerks, receptionists. And then you've got the guys that do just get paid on commission per sale. Is that where you put that?
So I think a portion of your salary probably is a fixed expense. I would say that in this, if we're selling 20 cars a month, I think you're going to probably need 2 people on staff, right? Probably yourself.
Depending on your operation, yeah.
Yeah, probably yourself. We're not talking about buy here, pay here at the moment. We're talking about me as an owner operator, and let's say at least one more person, right?
Okay.
So I'm going to need at least a portion of my salary to be a fixed expense, and a portion of that other person to be a fixed expense. So if I want to make 10 grand a month, which I think that's probably a little high selling 20 cars, but whatever that number is, let's say it's 5,000 a month, and the other person's, let's say, is $2,000 to $3,000 a month. But part of that's going to be a fixed expense because you've got to have those people to make the business work.
Yeah.
So let's just take $7,000 of that and say it's fixed expense.
Okay.
So that's our personnel fixed expense. And you've got a portion of that you also need to figure in your payroll expenses, payroll tax expense for that amount as well.
Okay. So you would tuck some of those people into a fixed expense, and then you would look only at that variable expense for your commission people. You'd also talk about your advertising, right?
You talk about your advertising because it's going to be big. It may not be as big for 20 cars a month, but you got to advertise something. That's not going to not be an expense. You got, unless maybe you're a broker or something, but I still think you're going to have a little bit of advertising expense.
Okay.
You got to have a website, right?
Yeah. You got some digital stuff. You got some, things like that are going to be out there. Any kind of office supplies, health insurance, benefits that you might give employees. I don't know, referrals you paid out to bird dogs or something. Yep.
And you're going to have some policy expense because every one of those cars you sell, something's going to break on them, right?
Oh, yeah. You might be helping people out after the sale with things here and there.
I think I'm averaging something like almost $150 a car per sold or something. Jeez. Craziness like that.
Giving it away.
Drives me insane. But you would think they'd go through your shop, they'd be ready to go, but they aren't ready to go, y'all.
So in this example, what do you think a total variable expense would be? Let's just take a stab at it so we kind of have a number to go off of.
I think you could probably say another $250 to $300 a car, I would think.
Okay. let's just use that. Let's just use a real simple number for everybody. Let's say you got another $250 in variable expenses per car sale. It seems low, but that's probably your commission and your advertising, or website.
Well, yeah, we're not. I didn't even think about commission, so that's gonna be higher than that.
Okay. So let's
because if you're let's just say you're going old school, $450 a car is what you would have been realized for that commission.
Okay.
Because if you're going 0.25%, or 0.25 of $1,800.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Sure. Yeah, sounds good.
So you're probably your variable expense is probably going to be probably $700 a car.
Okay. So let's round that up.
Includes commission.
Let's round it up to 750 so that I can work with some even numbers here, because we got 250 in fixed expense, we got 750 in variable expenses. So
we're at $1,000 a car.
We're at $1,000 in a 20 car example, right?
Right.
Okay. So what does that mean for me as a dealer, as someone pricing my cars, as someone deciding whether I'm going to cut something loose or not?
Well, I think what it means is you really need to know your numbers. Number one.
Okay.
So, and I know what you just asked, so let me go back to that.
Uh-huh.
I always think a bird in the hand is better than two in the bush.
Okay.
And I think if someone offers you profit on a car, you probably should take it.
You think if you're in the black, accounting for your overhead, or if we want to call this a pack fee, I mean, what's the difference there, I guess? Help me with that, Luke. In your opinion and the way you look at it, people that put packs on a car sale,
all you're doing
on the cost of the car, you're trying to
limit the salesperson's commission. That's all you're doing.
Yeah, you're trying to move some of that fixed and or variable expense onto the cost of goods sold, so that you're taking a little slice out of that gross profit on the salesman's
commission. So yeah, so what we do is if we had let's say $500 pack per car in this situation, you were cutting into that, into that salesman's commission by what is that number? By $125 a car. Mm-hmm. That's what you're doing.
Yeah.
So you're going from $450 down to $325. Average commission, that's fine, and that's what everybody's always done, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, and that's fine. A pack's fine. But I think, in general, if you have a car and someone offers you profit, I think it is a good idea always to sell that car. It might even make sense to sell it if someone's not offering you profit.
So where does that work out? So you're telling me it cost me $1,000 to sell a car, and I got an offer on a car that only gives me a $500 gross profit. I'm going to lose money. It might look like I'm making $500, but in the end of the month, I'm losing $500 to sell that car, right?
Well, no,
Okay.
because of this. That $500 right now is better than negative $1,500 2 months from now. Right?
Okay.
So you got to know your inventory, and you got to know if it makes sense for me to sell it. Now, if I get a car in today that is a perfect car and I know what it's going to sell for, and somebody offers me $500 profit, it probably doesn't make sense for me to do it. But you need to be the judge of that. You also got to look at the time, because if it sits on the lot for 3 weeks and I've got holding costs and I've got all this. So it always, my number one thing is, if it makes money, sell it. Gross profit. If it makes gross profit, sell it.
Okay. And that helps to have a gauge on what your gross profit is, right? So help me out here. Oftentimes we hear people say, well, I know my overhead is, $2,000 per car, so I can't let anything go unless I'm making at least $2,000.
Well, that's so silly.
You're losing money on that sale. Why would you sell that car cash instead of retail finance, you didn't even break even on it after accounting for your overhead.
Because cash flow matters. Number one, cash flow matters, and holding costs on that car matters.
Okay.
There's never, in my opinion, now there might be other people that say differently, but in my opinion, there's never a reason not to sell a $2,000 winner.
Okay.
There's never a reason not to sell a $1,000 winner unless you know that car, you absolutely 100% stole the car, and it just got here. They're upset. There's a
under 30 days on your lot, and you see that it's all there. Now, tell me this though. What I want to get at is, people, when you look at a fixed expense, guys, I want you to understand the scale, right? Now, if I sell 20 cars a month and it costs me $1,000 because of my fixed and variables, when I start selling, if I sold 30 cars this month, now all of a sudden my variable expenses have dropped to the point where I only need to make $800 per car. So sometimes that volume is going to reduce your fixed expenses to the point where it makes sense to let these cars go, right?
Exactly. And that is very important. And I didn't address that, but right. So if I see that all of a sudden I can start moving those cars for less gross profit, then what happens is your fixed expenses go down.
Background noise.
I know. I don't know why she's talking over there. I've asked her not to.
Luke needs a remodel at his lot. If there's any contractors in South Carolina, we're gonna make him a little module office in the back. So now, I am no proponent of the V Auto philosophy, right? The whole velocity thing, and you buy these near new cars and you turn them within 2 weeks and you make $500 up front on gross and you hope to make another 1,000 on back end products. And it's this volume churn thing, because in my philosophy, right, that's just a race to the bottom.
Well, you also
talking about volume solves everything, and I don't think we need to go that far.
No, you can't outrun your volume. I mean, your staff a lot of times can't outrun your volume. And that's what happens a lot of times in that store, is that to sell 100 cars a month, you got to have a huge setup, right? Mm-hmm. You've got to have a big piece of property. You've got to have a lot of advertising. You've got to have a lot of staff. You've got to get those cars ready. I just don't think there's a way that you can make that work. Mm-hmm. And after a while, what's going to happen is some banks are going to pull out because maybe you had some defaults and this, that, and the other. Next thing you know, you've got all these things going on and not enough profit. Mm-hmm. I've seen that happen a lot here, and just watching people. It just doesn't work. The only way I think to really, again, you got to know your fixed expenses, right? And you got to know your variables. Mm-hmm. If you don't know them, you don't know, and you can sell yourself right out of business.
I think that's what we wanted to drive home with this episode, guys, was you've got to know your numbers. And so everybody sit down with your accountant or with your wife or whoever's helping you with your books, look at it, divide out those fixed and variable expenses, go back 6, 12, 18 months, track it kind of trending, and see where you're at on those, because that's going to help you know, hey, you know what? My fixed expenses is so low, I really could sell more volume at less gross profit, and that's only going to help me.
That's right.
I'm saying no to a lot of deals I should be saying yes to because I think that they're too slim. And so now all of a sudden I'm only selling 10 a month, and it's making the problem worse.
Yeah.
Because I'm not getting my volume up because I'm so stingy on trying to hold my upfront grosses.
And know what your holding cost is per day. Because in those holding costs, if it's costing you, let's say this particular person, what is it like? Holding costs would be somewhere in the neighborhood of, let's say that person's keeping 40 cars in stock. You're looking at about $12 to $14 a day. Mm-hmm. So that car that's on your lot is going to cost you $450 a month. Let's think about that too.
Wow.
So these are the type of things you need to really know before you decide to. Yeah.
And Luke, I can't always wrap my head around holding costs because I might be like some dealers who I say, well, I own all my cars. I don't have a flooring line. I don't have an interest expense. But what I can wrap my head around is opportunity cost. And that's something that that's something that I try to help my guys understand is that this car that sat here for 6 months, I should have turned that 6 times, right?
Just think about it like this, Jeff. That car is a pile of cash, right?
Yeah.
And
I need to turn it into another pile of cash.
Every time. And if you're turning into 10% more than you did last time, if you do that, for 6 months, that's a lot. That's a big return. So you've got to think about that. That car just sitting there does nobody any good. And I think I've said this before on the podcast, but this is something that Chuck said at the last 20 group that really makes a lot of sense. And that is, think about that car as well, producing $400 a month payment. So in the buy here, pay here business,
guys,
it really matters. If that car is sitting for 6 months not sold, it costs you $2,400 essentially to sit there.
Yeah.
So reducing the price, reducing the down payment may make sense in that scenario. So it's not just retail people we need to talk about when it comes to holding costs. I see so many dealers go, "Oh, I've had that car for a year. It doesn't matter. It didn't lose any money. It didn't eat anything." Well, yes, it did. There's a reason that car example.
Well, that's what you look at and you say, okay, well, if my gross profit from this example is $1,800 a month, and if that car sat for 6 months, instead of me selling it 6 times, in theory, I should have had a 30-day turn. I should have sold that same dollar amount 6 times.
That's 10.8
math to do, right?
That's 10.8
dollars.
Yep.
$1,800. That car cost me in lost opportunity, lost gross profit by just thinking that I could hold out a little bit longer.
That's right. And if you look at that in actual percentages, that's 100%.
Yeah.
Because that car cost me in theory $10,000. Or I sold it for $10,000. So it actually cost me more than 100% for 6 months. Actually, APY is more like 200%. So we got to think about the way these things work. Even if I sold that car 3 times, if my turn is 6 times a year, it cost me $5,400. So you got to think about these things, guys. One thing I want to back up that I saw you post on a little thing in the Independent Dealer this week was talking about someone who was asking the difference between a C corp and an S corp and an LLC and all these things. And you said something that everybody needs to listen to, and that is go find you a accountant, a CPA that is in the car business, that knows what they're doing, because your local person probably doesn't know what they're talking about, and they can't teach you to do the things that honestly that we could teach you to do, because we've been trained by automotive CPAs. So if your wife's doing your books, that's fine. I'm sure she's great and she's wonderful, but she doesn't know what she doesn't know, and it's not her fault.
Yeah, and it's not even. I mean, sure, keep doing it on the month to month. Do your own monthly reconciliations. I do that. I have a guy jump in quarterly and button it up right. Definitely filing your taxes. That final tax return needs to be done by a professional auto CPA. I cannot tell you how long I went back and forth with my local guy for the first 10 to 15 years I was in business. And every single year, I felt like I would sit down and be like, well, what about this? And he didn't know enough about the car business to find the issues. And I didn't know enough about accounting to tell him the answers. So every year it was like a whole new freaking rodeo. We had to learn all over again because I had learned some piece of information that I relayed to him. And I'm educating him on, especially if you have an RFC. The discounts, you got to find a professional.
That's a pain. That's definitely a topic for a different time. Hey, Jeff, I'm going to promote something real quick if you don't mind.
Go ahead. Let's wrap it up.
NABD is coming up October 6th through the 8th, I think.
Yeah, 6th to 8th in Chicago.
I am speaking on Tuesday, 2:15 to 3 p.m. We're going to talk about time to line, something I'm working on. I think everybody out there should be working on it. It goes along with what we're talking about today, how to get your cars ready faster, how to create a process behind that. But if you're coming to NABD, come check us out. Jeff, you coming or no?
Yeah, I just barely booked. Again, we don't have anything to do with NABD or NIADA. We're not associated. What we want you guys to do is get educated. And of course, we want to meet everybody, hang out, have a good time. So if you can get out to Chicago, make it happen. I mean, it's great education, right? I mean, this is specific to Buy Here, Pay Here. NABD is the National Association of Buy Here, Pay Here Dealers. Is that it?
Yep, National Alliance of Buy Here, Pay Here.
Alliance of Buy Here, Pay Here Dealers. Okay, so it's going to be very specific to Buy Here, Pay Here. So apologize to any of our retail or wholesale guys that are listening. But regardless, Luke's information is useful.
Yeah, because this is really, it's at a Buy Here, Pay Here commerce, but the time to line is really important for retail dealers as well, if not more important. Also, I'm speaking the week before at VIADA. The weekend before, I think that Saturday, I'm speaking on collections. So if you're a Virginia dealer and you want to come hang out and meet me and listen to a good collection seminar, please be there. I'm not sure how well it is attended at VIADA, but Virginia dealers, come on out. I know there's got to be some of you out there.
Awesome. Great, Luke. This has been fun. I know we've gone on, and this is a long one, but it's so important, guys. Hopefully we brought some sort of value today to at least question your current practices and go talk to a CPA that's going to be able to get your books fine-tuned so you know what you're doing. Share this with a friend. Put it in a post. Tag us. Appreciate the feedback. Hope you guys enjoyed.